A 32-year-old historical milestone just completely shattered, and the tournament hasn't even finished the group stage yet. The record-breaking scale of the 2026 FIFA World Cup is literally rewriting the fundamental laws of sports logistics. It feels completely surreal to be watching this unfold in real time. You walk around any of these host cities right now, and the atmosphere is just suffocating in the best way possible. The sheer scale of what is happening across North America is fundamentally altering how we even comprehend massive global events. It's entirely unprecedented. We're looking at a permanent shift in the physical footprint of global sports, and the data coming out of the stadiums is proving it every single day.
3,605,357.
Hold on. Just process that for a second. 3.6 million people. That is the equivalent of a major metropolitan city physically moving through turnstiles in just a matter of weeks.
And that is the exact spectator count officially clocked on June 25, 2026. This isn't the final tally. This is breaking news from the absolute middle of the tournament. The physical volume of human beings flooding into these stadiums is completely shattering every single projection the organizers had on the table.
Right, because usually you get these massive numbers at the closing ceremony. You get the final confetti drop, the trophy is lifted, and they flash the total attendance on the broadcast. We are getting this data point before some teams have even played their third group stage match. It's pure madness.
For over 3 decades, the legendary 1994 World Cup was the benchmark. That event set the gold standard with 3,587,538 fans. Sports economists and logisticians thought that number was absolutely untouchable. Because USA 94 was lightning in a bottle. The stadiums were massive, the timing was perfect, the global excitement was at a fever pitch. Everyone in the football world thought that specific record would stand for 50 years. Exactly. And 2026 just blew right past it. The crucial context here is that the 94 record was the final total for an entire completed tournament. We overtook that absolute mountain of ticket sales before the knockout rounds even kicked into high gear. Wait, that means every single match from the round of 32 onwards is just pure unprecedented inflation of a record that's already locked in. The final number is going to look like a mathematical error. The massive 48-team expansion. How exactly did we get to this sheer volume? It doesn't happen by accident. The entire architecture of this event had to be completely overhauled to sustain this kind of gravity.
You have to literally redesign the geometry of the sport. You can't just squeeze millions more people into the exact same logistical mold. The infrastructure had to expand dramatically.
The stark contrast in the tournament mathematics tells the story. The old format we all grew up watching was locked at 32 squads playing 64 matches. The new format pushes that out to 48 squads playing 104 matches. Think about that. That's 40 extra matches. That is practically an entire second tournament bolted onto the original schedule. The physical toll, the stadium maintenance, the security perimeters, it all compounds. And by adding those extra slots, you're bringing in a massive variety of new global fan bases. Countries that historically spent decades missing out on qualification are now packing their bags, buying international flights, and bringing their absolute passion directly into the stands. It changes the entire demographic makeup of the host cities. You aren't just seeing the traditional European and South American heavyweights anymore. You have a completely decentralized, genuinely global influx of fans occupying hotels, transit systems, and fan zones across the continent. And they aren't just showing up to the fan zones. Across the first 60 games played, the average stadium occupancy rate officially sits at 99.7%.
No way! 99.7%? You naturally assume that with all those extra matches, especially the ones featuring smaller nations in the early group stage, you'd inevitably see a massive dip in attendance. You would expect to see empty upper decks for a Tuesday afternoon game between two unranked teams.
But we aren't seeing that at all. The appetite for this tournament is completely voracious. Every single ticket is being devoured. A 99.7% occupancy rate across 60 matches means there is virtually not an empty seat in the house, regardless of who is stepping onto the pitch. Which builds directly into the physical logistics. We're looking at an unprecedented hosting scale. For the first time ever, we have 3 nations jointly running the operation. Canada, Mexico, and the United States utilizing 16 global host cities simultaneously.
The continental footprint required to pull this off is completely mind-bending. We're talking about coordinating massive crowds across international borders, multiple time zones, and drastically different climates. You have teams playing at altitude in Mexico City and then immediately flying to sea level in Vancouver.
And all 16 of those cities are working in perfect synchronization. The transit authorities, the aviation sectors, the local security grids, they're entirely fused together to house this massive, rotating roster of athletes and fans moving seamlessly across a continent.
To anchor that insane occupancy statistic in physical reality really puts the scale into perspective. Mexico's iconic Estadio Azteca has a capacity of 80,824. The massive MetLife Stadium in the United States holds 80,663.
These aren't boutique mid-sized arenas built for regional domestic leagues. These are absolute coliseums. These are cities within cities.
Precisely. To have stadiums of this massive architectural scale running at near maximum capacity for over 100 matches requires a completely different level of global mobility. You have 80,000 people cycling in and out of a single concrete structure, being replaced by another, completely different group of 80,000 people 48 hours later. The operational stress test on these venues is entirely historic.
Winning the digital generation. Physical tickets and stadium gates are only half the story in this explainer. To truly understand the scale of this cultural moment, we have to pivot away from the physical turnstiles and look directly at the screens.
Because if you aren't capturing the audience holding the phone in their hands, you are fundamentally losing the future of the sport.
Organizers knew the old broadcasting playbook wasn't going to cut it for a tournament of this sheer magnitude. They struck preferred platform deals directly with TikTok and YouTube, specifically focusing on match highlights and appetizer segments.
This is the old guard finally speaking Gen Z's language. For years, sports executives have been wringing their hands over how to get younger audiences to sit down for a traditional 90-minute broadcast on cable television. This strategy throws that old anxiety right in the trash.
They are actively feeding them bite-sized, high-energy, vertical content right where they already live. They aren't asking the digital generation to come to the broadcast. They're taking the broadcast directly into the digital generation's algorithms. It is a completely different production pipeline. The overarching media strategy is built on absolute multi-platform dominance. In the Brazilian market, Kazi TV is streaming matches directly on YouTube, entirely bypassing traditional paywalls. You also have the aggressive launch of FIFA Plus on DAZN to expand dedicated streaming coverage, while traditional heavyweights like Fox Sports, Telemundo, and Bell Media anchor the massive linear television audiences.
It's completely inescapable. They are capturing every conceivable demographic on Earth simultaneously. If you're my dad, you're watching the traditional broadcast on a massive flat screen in a pub. If you're a teenager in São Paulo, you're streaming it for free on YouTube. If you're commuting to work, you're swiping through highlight reels on the subway. You're trapped inside this ecosystem no matter where you look.
The climax? Reaching the world. We've mapped out the massive stadium architecture. We've broken down the decentralized digital streaming strategies. Now it's time for the final count of what this global machine has actually produced.
The ultimate crescendo, the number every single media executive and global advertiser on the planet has been waiting for.
5 billion. Hold on. Let that completely sink in. 5 billion viewers. That is more than half the human population on Earth. That is the biggest number in sports history, period. Nothing else even comes close to that level of penetration. When you combine the expanded 104-match format, the specialized social media distribution algorithms, and the traditional legacy broadcast networks all firing at full capacity at the exact same time, you hit an entirely new stratosphere of global visibility. We are looking at half the globe sharing the exact same cultural experience at the exact same time. It's a level of synchronized human attention that has never been achieved before in the history of media.
The biggest sporting event on the planet redefines global media scale and cultural impact for the next generation. Let's step back and look at the sheer gravity of what we've unpacked in this explainer. We shattered historical physical stadium benchmarks before the most important high-stakes games even started. We expanded the entire geometry of the sport across a continent, proving that you can add dozens of extra matchups without diluting the product.
If anything, the product became significantly more potent. We proved that 99.7% of those massive Coliseum seats will be filled regardless of the flags flying on the pitch. The appetite is absolutely limitless.
And then we fused legacy linear broadcasting with native social media streaming to capture a massive digital demographic that sports executives have been hopelessly chasing for a decade. This is no longer just a soccer tournament. It's a synchronized global engine. For an entire month, this single event dictates international travel patterns, it monopolizes global media consumption, and it sets the baseline for pop culture across dozens of distinct societies.
It rewrites the playbook. Every single major global event, whether it's the Olympics, the Super Bowl, or Formula One, is going to look at this operational blueprint. The way they scale physical infrastructure, the way they slice up broadcast rights, the way they integrate vertical video directly into the viewing experience. The standard for what it means to be a global event has been permanently raised.
The blueprint for how the world consumes sports, both physically and digitally, has fundamentally changed right in front of our eyes.
We are witnessing the ultimate proof of concept for the next era of global entertainment. So the real question is, who lifts that trophy in July?